Guess what time it is? It is Sunday night, 7 o'clock Pacific time. And you know what time that is? It's time for Jon Ferrian Live. Come on in. Let's get on with this show. We've got an amazing guest with us tonight that I'm really excited to be able to tell you guys a little bit about. And it's going to be a great message, So come on in. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. You guys know the routine. What I love about it when you guys do this, it actually tells us your name, so I get the feeling for who's watching and where you're from. And so I see Ian McNichol, one of our top fans, is here chiming in first. At least that's the first comment I can see on my side. We've got Ian from Saskatchewan, and we've got Kevin Carell, another top fan. Another welcome to the team, buddy. All right, guys, make sure we're sharing this out and getting this amazing new show tonight out into the universe. So you live large universe, everybody needs to hear about it. All right, guys, Arizona, Mr. Michael Flower is watching. And we have Linda Hill Batterton. Welcome. You're one of our amazing winners of our scholarship program. Super stoked. You're going to be going to Brett Rasmussen's Ride Rasmussen School for his Avalanche Level 1 Avalanche class out in Idaho, I believe is where you're going. So we got Mr. Patrick Fines in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. All right, guys, keep it coming in. Drop it in the comments where you're watching it from if you're coming in. And we got an exciting show for you tonight. So one of the things I want to tell you guys about is this amazing logo. This logo is available right now on livelargeitemorder.sale or com/sale. Go to the website. It's in the show description. Reminder, all of the shirts and hats like the one I'm wearing tonight, the hat here, all of those go into the website, and you get in there and order those. And every single order that's ordered between September 1st and December 31st is going to win one of 3 prizes. We got 3 epic prizes simply for ordering the shirt. All the profits are going to go over to Live Large University over at Erie. And when you do that, you're also in to win either a Ride Rasmussen style Skills Day class, a level 1 class with Mad Ends over at Mountain Skillz, or the Mountain Riding Lab guys out in Jackson, Wyoming. Those guys are putting up 3 epic prizes to anybody who gets in there and orders stuff. We'll have a random drawing at the end of December, and we will get you guys set up. So let me drop that logo down here. The next thing is the share and win, Fly Racing Goggles. We got that. Make sure you share those out. Get the show out. Fly Racing's always supporting us nice. And don't forget, we got a new opportunity, just like the one up on the wall here behind me I've got in my office. I've got a Live Large wall hanging. This is a steel wall hanging, all cut out of steel, grinded up and beautiful looking. This thing's $75, and you can order it from the link in the website in the show notes here. And $10 of that will go to Live Large University to help support the scholarship program too. So let's kill the music and figure out if our buddy Logan is still awake or what's going on here. So let's drop down the screen here in 3, 2, and 1. Hey, Logan, you there, bud? Hey, what's going?
Am I live right now?
Oh, dude, yeah. What? Hey, I forgot to tell you. Yeah, it's 7 o'clock Sunday night, right?
I was just playing with my new 509 goggles, but I guess we're going live.
Yeah, dude, you need to pay attention here and focus. You can't be just screwing around with your new gear, buddy.
I was just too excited, I guess.
It is snow season. Guess what I got to do? Yes, I was up on the snow yesterday. Did you see that in my Facebook page?
I was up in the snow as well.
Where'd you go?
Up in Cleon. My truck decided it wanted to wander its way up some rocky snowmobile trails that aren't quite ready for snowmobile skis yet, but it may get there hopefully soon.
Yeah, I saw.
I'm personally sledless now. I just sold mine, so hopefully the new one shows up soon before all the snow shows up, or I guess I'll be riding the sled behind someone else's snowmobile.
Awesome. Yeah, I was up yesterday with the Northwest Glacier Cruisers, and we were up on Mount Baker, and we were pulling the hut up to a new location, actually. And they normally have it up in what they call the Blue Lake area up there. The hut's now actually going to be by the dam on what they call the Blue Lake Trail, kind of the cut through the woods trail versus the main route up to Schreiber's Meadows. And so we went up there, cleared some brush back, and had a good time with the club up there. And dude, there was like 4 or 5 inches of snow, even at, what is it, maybe 2,000-3,000 feet of elevation, a couple thousand feet of elevation. So It's happening. It's coming.
It definitely is. I drove all the way to Lewiston and back yesterday morning, bright and early, and there's more snow as you go east. So
That's
that's
awesome.
definitely a promising sign.
That's awesome. So if anybody in the show is watching here, anybody in the audience is watching, and you've got snow in your neighborhood, like I know for a fact, my mom and dad and my brother, I've seen pictures posted of central Minnesota. They got about a foot of snow there. Let us know how much snow's in your neighborhood and how much fell this last week, because I think we're right on that verge of starting off an epic winter. But Logan, let's tell everybody a little bit about. I'll start here, but let's tell a little bit about like how you and I have gotten to know each other and we've interacted a little bit. But my memory tells me is for sure over social media. I followed you. You followed me for a while, and then the last couple of years, I think at the snow shows, I've seen you hanging out in some of the booths at the shows and walking the shows and stuff like that too. But it's good to finally have you on the show. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool, cool. Yeah, you reached out to me. What is it? Couple weeks ago, week and a half ago maybe, and said like, hey, I've got a pretty cool story I'd love to get on and share with everybody on the show. And so you and I talked a little bit, and we're going to go into some pretty interesting stuff tonight. I'm really excited to share with everybody. But before we get going too far, let's just get you officially introduced to everybody and let everybody know a little bit about like who the heck is Logan Mayer.
So I grew up around snowmobiles. Snowmobiles, my life. I spend too much money on snowmobiles. And so, growing up as a kid, we've had our cabin in Cle Elum, Washington from the time I was 1 year old. So from the time I could suck the dirt off the rocks while my dad was building the cabin to get on a Mini Z and ride it around at 18 months old was my first throttle experience. Before that, I was in a little diaper thing hanging baby carrier on the front of my mom, and the one funny story she likes to share is she had me in the front and I fell asleep, and she decided she was going to go do a hill climb with me in the front of her pouch.
Okay.
Well, she fell off, and the snowmobile decided to run me and her over. So I guess that's how I was introduced to snowmobiles, is when a track hit my head and said, hey, you're going to be a snowmobiler one day.
well, the standing joke I tell everybody when they ask me like when I started snowmobiling, I just say like I'm pretty sure I was conceived on a snowmobile, so probably before I was born.
Yeah. So, sounds about right.
Sounds about the same for you. Your folks have been riding since probably before you were born, and here you came along and just jumped right into the family fun.
Yeah, so I started when I was 18 months old and worked my way up through a couple different sleds. I think I went from a snow scoot or snow sport up to a phaser. And my older brother, it's 3 years older than me, had an exciter. So we had a phaser and an exciter. And then we got 550 revs when they came out in 04. And we thought those were the coolest things ever, because you go from a trailing arm sled that sits 2 inches off the ground to something with some suspension. And then from there, I jumped directly from a 550 to an 800 rev.
Nice.
Dad gave me his hand-me-down 05 800 rev, loudest sled I've ever been on. I had learned. Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, how old were you when you got on an 800 and started riding the 800?
I think I was 12 years old.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I think that's about what I had my kids on at that age.
Yeah.
800 summits.
10 to 12. I'd have to scroll way back in the photos and do the math exactly when I was riding that thing. But it was about the loudest sled you could possibly have. It had an inside wheel kit on it, so it was semi-tippy for what the rev chassis was. Yeah. And that's what I started learning to side hill and actually start my progression as a rider on. From there, I went to an 11 E-Tech 800, and then to my Arctic Cat that I've been riding this last 2 years. We grew up in Cle Elum. I've rode in Cle Elum my whole life. I know that place like the back of my hand, as well as we go to Whistler about every year and do the Pemberton Ice Caps. That's my favorite place to ride, and I'm a little upset that the borders are going to probably be closed, but fingers are definitely crossed.
Fingers crossed they'll open the borders up this year.
Definitely crossed. Yeah.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the transition that you've had, from 12 years old, starting on your 800 to, current sleds riding. And just to remind everybody is, I think we said it already, but I'll say it out loud again, is you're currently 21 years old. And so, in the sledding world, speaking as a guy who just had a birthday recently and is a little older than 21 years old, I'll just tell you that, there's this kind of generational phases that go on, and there's a multiple things going on here. That's part of this conversation is that, there's a number of folks, kids, I'll call them, you're a young guy, that are your age and younger that frankly just aren't finding snowmobiling all that interesting. And so for me, and I think a lot of people who watch the show, it's always super, we get super stoked when we see someone like yourself who's out there. And then also the guys and women both who are your age, who are getting into this and have been riding since they were kids, are pretty dang good riders because they've seen, their parents have seen, and then they've seen all the, schooled videos, the videos on YouTube, social media, and you guys have had some really incredible people to look up to as you've learned the sport, right? And so let's talk a little bit about your progression of riding and some of the stuff you're doing now. Like, I follow you on social media, so I get to see it, but, give us a little bit of a run up, and then let's kind of highlight some of the wicked stuff you guys have been doing in the backcountry before, you started taking your Avalanche classes, which we'll get to in a little bit.
So my progression was, seat time's everything on a snowmobile, in my opinion. Without the seat time, you can watch as many videos as you want and put it all here. But unless you can put it here and with your body and make your body one with the snowmobile, then you don't get there. So seat time was it was awesome that my mom and dad worked incredibly hard when we were younger and allowed us to go up to our cabin on the weekend, almost every weekend in the winter, and hop on these snowmobiles and ride them. We started watching Chris Brandt when he first came out, and Brett when they first came out together doing the schooled videos. Me and my brother thought that was the coolest thing ever, and we took that to heart. And as soon as we'd watch that video, we'd go outside and fire up the sleds and go hit the nearest trail, which was a half mile up the road from our cabin, and find the first hillside we could and practice what we just watched. So the repetition of watching these new practices and things of that nature to going and trying it. And then as time goes on, you start seeing crazy things like bow ties and reverse entries. And you see all these crazy things. You're like, that's really cool. I want to try that. And this last year in Whistler is when I first started to try reverse entries and, off cornices. I've never tried it before. I've jumped the sled pretty good. I think my first big jump on a snowmobile was probably when I was about 15 on my 11 Skidoo 800. And there was a big jump that I seen another guy jump before, and he overshot it and hurt himself pretty good. And so, it's not really a big booter, but it was something that you could cruise up the backside of this takeoff, and it just floated you low and long. And that was my first ever jump, the coolest photo video I've ever had. That was my big eye-opening of floating through the air is really cool, as well as growing up riding dirt bikes. I've jumped a dirt bike a time or two, but it's way different. Riding a dirt bike versus sled and trying to learn the difference between the two. This last 2 years, I was riding my dirt bike like it was a snowmobile, and let's just say the front end comes up a lot when you're leaning off the back like a snowmobile. So trying to put the difference between the two is always fun, of where your body's got to be in speed and momentum. But watching the videos, getting out there and trying things, went from jumping and doing wheelies to trying to do reverse entries to learning hopovers to putting a turbo on my snowmobile and doing all sorts of crazy tree lines that probably shouldn't be able to do. So it's been a very fun, and I love it. It's what I do. And so when I go out there, it's kind of a competition, but it's not, we're out there to have fun, but you always want to do bigger and better every time you go out, and you'll watch something and want to try it. So,
well, and just to give people like one more little notch in a vision into kind of the caliber and the skill of rider you are too, is it's my understanding, and I'm pretty certain I'm right here, but I'll let you elaborate, is, you've picked up a few sponsors over the years just because of your riding skills, your social media presence, and some of the things you've been doing. Why don't you highlight for everybody just a few of the sponsors that you have? And you told me too that you have your own little clothing line going on there too.
Yeah, so I got I kind of got big into cameras this last year while out on the riding dirt bikes and whatnot. You see all these guys taking photos of dirt bikes, and I bought a camera last year and took it on a couple different trips, and I didn't have the right setup and was keeping it in a bag in my backpack, and I think it got wet, so I smoked a $700 camera, and I was a little upset about it. But
Ouch.
so I went and bought the camera I've been wanting, and spent a lot of time playing with that. And so this year, if anybody's going to be looking to get professional photos for your social media or video work, to where we're doing snowmobile edits, I'm fully set up and got way too much money into my camera, just like I usually do into my sled. And
This is the part where I start scratching my beard and my forehead, going like, maybe Logan and I need to ride together this winter a little bit. Just saying.
yep, I'm going to have a Pelican case on my tunnel, and it'll have my equipment packed in there. So with the combination of being able to take photos for different sponsors and provide them with high quality content, that's usually what sponsors look for. They want engagement, they want ability, and they want content. Those are the three things I've learned through business classes of college and things of that nature. So being able to provide these companies that support me is important. My photography company is Rev Limiter Productions, like a dirt bike kind of holding the rev limiter. And then, so current sponsors, I worked with HMK for a while and grew my presence and got in contact with someone at 509. And I've been very blessed to be able to ride for them all summer on my dirt bike and continue on this winter now with snowmobile. So that's my big main sponsor would be 509. Deviate Inc does all my wraps. So they do my snowmobile wraps, my dirt bike stuff. OGIO hooked me up with an awesome gear bag this year that I'm super pumped with. Red, white, and blue sled, hard bottom, carries all my gear a lot better than anything previous. Who else? There's all sorts of ones. Munster Finger Throttles, Cheetah Factory Racing was a new one that I just picked up this year. So bars and risers are now, I've been running their stuff for years. I actually got the chance to meet the owner while we were in Pemberton. We needed a new set of bars for a sled, and we were talking to one of the local shops, and he's like, hey, Cheetah Factory's right down the road. So we called him up. He's like, yeah, I'm in my shop. We pulled into the shop with the truck and trailer and took a look around, seen all the products, met the owner, super cool, great company, family owned, hardworking. He's got his little 7-year-old son slapping stickers in boxes and taping boxes up. It's super, super cool, super awesome family. So that's a big one. A company that's not really known is called Bush Pusher Designs. Okay. And they do reservoir protectors as well. So they do reservoir protectors. So your Arctic Cats and your Skidoos with the plastic reservoirs that are vulnerable to trees punching holes in them. When you're riding technical, those are metal that go over the top and protect those, as well as they have a switch relocate plate now. Nice. So you can pull your kill switch and reverse off your bars from hitting trees and move them down right below the riser. So those are a few of the companies.
Sounds like a busy guy.
I work with a lot of companies. I help try to grow a few different clothing lines. I just picked up one. It's called Ready to Ride, which I thought was the coolest thing I've ever seen since snow hit the ground when I was a kid. But so Ready to Ride is they were brand new. They followed me with about 120 followers, and I've been helping them out and providing them photos and content, like taking their hat out in the snow and getting some snow hitting the hat photos, high quality photos that they just posted. So all sorts of different brands. I'm always looking for new opportunities to help people grow and help. I like to support people that support me. So I find a big pride and joy in reaching out to companies and seeing what I can do to help them and seeing what they can do to help me. It makes things more affordable for a kid that's 21. And it also, helps them and it helps me. So,
yeah. Well, the cool part is, establishing, your presence in the industry and what you've been able to accomplish so far is amazing. And one thing that you shared with me in the pre-show discussion that we had a few days ago was that, your dad was kind of your inspiration for riding and such. And he also was the inspiration for what you believed at the time was Avalanche Classes, right? Like, talk to me a little bit about that. Like, you guys as a family would go pretty consistently every year to the Avalanche Classes. And in your mind, you were like, I'm going to Avalanche Classes, right? So talk us a little bit about that, and then let's spring into the surprise gift that your neighbor dropped off on you.
Yeah, so the Avalanche classes, we were always going to the awareness classes at the dealerships. Usually is where they're held for the most part around Washington. There's quite a few dealerships that hold them. Clem's has one, I-90 has one. The Last Resort up by us usually has one. And so, these awareness classes are a big deal. We learned about them probably 3 years ago or so, 3-4 years ago. Before that, we were clueless. We grew up riding with Dad, and we dropped into some things that, even the awareness class, you should know better not to drop into when you're out in Whistler. But, it didn't become a full-blown issue. I wouldn't say an issue, but it wasn't really well known 5, 6, 7 years ago. It was out there.
Yeah.
But there wasn't these classes, there wasn't these things out there to be able to make the people around you aware. So if you didn't self-study the topic, you would have never known a couple of years ago. And so as these things have progressed and became more aware to the public and more involved, we started going to these awareness classes every year. It's always good to refresh the memory.
Yeah.
So we would go and sit down and listen and make sure we had the equipment. For the longest time, no one in our family ever rode with Avi packs. We did have beacons. They were way outdated.
Yeah.
And we had probes, but no one ever knew about an Avi pack. We didn't know how to use the beacons, but we had them. Nor did we know how to use the probes, but we had them.
Yeah.
And, having the stuff is one thing, but knowing how to use is another thing. I'll get into that in a few here.
Yeah. But yeah, so then as we talked through this a couple days ago, you shared with me that a great neighbor of yours by the name of Lauren Dean gave you a little surprise. Like, tell us a little bit about that, and then what evolved from there, and go ahead.
Yeah, so my neighbor, Lauren, I had no idea, but 6, 7 months ago, I guess he was at some sort of snowmobiling event and won an Air Avalanche 1 training class. That's a 3-day training class. And he came to me and he's like, "Hey, I got this training class. I don't think I'm going to use it." He goes, "Would you like to use it? I think it would be better off in your hands if you go and learn it and bring back your knowledge to our neighborhood," which is a big snowmobiling neighborhood. We got cabins all over us that are big snowmobile families. And so he gifted me that certificate to be able to go and do that. And a lot of the times as young adults like me, I was 20 at the time, I couldn't foresee spending $700-800 to go learn the Avalanche class. I thought the awareness class was enough, and I knew what I was doing. And so I took that certificate and took it into heart and went up to Baker and went for this 3-day class. The first day was in a classroom, looking at all sorts of different things, looking at different snow layers and snow packs, different avalanche types and how they can slide and where they would break, looking at slopes and angles, and how different snow packs bond and heat up and separate and create different layers. There's a big science into it. So the first day in the class was a science-filled, all about the snow. You'd think that the snow is pretty simple as it freezes out of the sky and hits the ground and you start up your snowmobile and ride in it. But there is quite a lot of science in that. So that was the first day. Day 2 and day 3 were on snowmobiles, and I believe there was probably 8 of us in the class. And so we would go out, and it was a little shy in snow. It was nasty, wet, rainy, cold. It wasn't the best conditions, but we all had a great attitude because we were there to learn. And so we went up, and the first day we did some basic training stuff with our beacons and our probes. And what really came to my eye with this class is when we started burying backpacks. When we stuck beacons in a backpack and you sat in the warming hut and the instructor went and buried one backpack, single backpack. So you're only finding one rider in an avalanche at this point. This is day 1 of field training. It took me 9 or 10 minutes to find one backpack that was probably 100 feet from me. And that's when my eyes opened, and it was a big wow. you have been riding a turbo sled, going up stupid stuff, jumping off stupid cornices, going way too big over your head, and you probably should have died 6 times by now because you can't even find a beacon that's 100 feet from your face under the snow, only about 6 inches under the snow.
Yeah.
It's not 4 or 5 feet. It's 6 inches under the snow, 100 feet from you.
Let's
and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, let's pause for a second here and just kind of let that sink in, right? And let me ramble here for a minute is, for anybody who's watching this that's taken a level 1 class or even have gone further into level 2 classes or pro level classes, by the way, Logan, one of your classmates from your class is watching the show tonight. I don't know if you know him by name, but Joe Labernick was in. He says he was in your class with you when you guys went out last year. So
that sounds familiar. Yeah.
Yep. So he's here giving you a thumbs up, cheering you on. Said he enjoyed going to the class with you. But that's the thing, folks. Is like if you've never been through this kind of a level class, right, where it's the 3 days, you're out in the snow with an instructor, you're burying backpacks or duffel bags with gear in it so that you can find it. You're actually going through the transition and you're timing it, and then you go to multiple burials, which we'll probably talk about in a minute here too. But like just let that sink in for a minute. We've got a guy like Logan here who shreds with the best of them, pro level rider, sponsored rider out there taking Avalanche awareness classes each year, and in his mind has his crap together. And he's sitting here today in front of you and sharing with you how wide open his head was and his eyes were and just the experience he had and like how it just immediately changed his perspective on knowing that truly, like this now, Logan, right? If 9 to 10 minutes, your buddy's dead or your family member's dead, right? Like the likelihood of them surviving 9 or 10 minutes under the snow is really low. Like
very minimal.
Yeah, your goal is to get them out in under 5 minutes if at all possible, and then the likelihood of them, as long as there's not a lot of trauma, surviving in under 5 minutes is pretty high. But by the time you get to 10 minutes, it's like very low. By the time you get to 15 minutes, almost impossible for them to survive. Beyond that, it's almost certain that they're not going to survive, right? And that was this just giant stop you in your tracks, experience that you had that really was like, oh my gosh. And the coincidence that, Lauren thought enough of you and your skills and what was there to gift that to you, and the transition and the change that it's made for you so far is amazing. So kind of bring it back to you and finish up kind of telling us about what the class was like and the multiple burials and stuff too. And then we'll get into, what you've done differently after the class. But let's finish up the thoughts on the class first. So.
Yeah. So, let me backtrack real quick. Previously before the class, I took my beacon, put it out in the dirt and had my buddies go find it. And they put my beacon out in the dirt and I went and find it, but we weren't burying it in the dirt. We were just go sitting it under a tree in the backyard and you find your way around with the arrows and, that works. But when it comes time to find something under the surface, it's a lot harder when you can't see it as the arrow is telling you where to go. When you can look, 10, 20 feet past your beacon, you look up and boom, there it is. When you're using the beacon and you're following your arrows and following the arrows in a straight line, being very precise with your movements, and making sure that you're not changing where your beacon's going left to right. And if it's facing straight and it says go right, you move straight and follow that. If it changes back, then you got to come back and figure out where you went wrong. The things that they teach you in this class, the technical aspects of this class is night and day difference. From day one, when we first started, taking 15 minutes to find a backpack that was 6 inches under the snow, 100 feet across the open flat area, to day 2, finding multiple burials. There's a lot that goes into it, as well as being able to efficiently pull your probes out of your backpack and deploy them. A lot of people don't think about these things, and you got the probe in your backpack, you got the beacon on, cool, you're safe. And, that was my thought before, is I'm safe. I have an Avi backpack, my beacon on, I'm okay. And it's not that. The awareness classes are a good thing to go do, but unless you practice these things and go out and spend time burying backpacks and having to find them with your beacon and be able to probe for them to where you're not hitting false indicators like a log or a rock under the snow,
Yeah.
until you know what that soft feeling feels like when you're hitting something under the snow that like a backpack with clothing in it would be like a thigh on a leg or an arm, you know, with some squish to it.
Yep.
It's tough. And so being able to spend the time to actually go out and learn this has not only made me a more aware rider, but made me feel more safe about myself and being with other people, because now I am able to, if for whatever reason we made a mistake on our judgment, which does happen, that's how mistakes happen. And, you know, there's mistakes on judgments that happen. And it's being able to react and be quick with your finding. You shouldn't have to use your finding techniques, because you should be able to evaluate the snow beforehand and not make decisions that are going to put you in harm's way. But, you know, mistakes do happen in judgment sometime. And that's where that being able to find people and knowing that you're in a group of people. Now, when I go out with my friends, I have full understanding that they know what's going on with the snowpack. I've taught them. I've been able to share my knowledge and make them safer riders, make myself a safer rider, make altogether a group a safe riding group. And that's very important to me. And I would hope it's the same for everybody else, because when you lose someone that you know or you love, that's when it opened your eyes. That's when things hit at home. You know, you see these things on the news and you're like, oh, he's probably making a dumb decision. No, he probably shouldn't be there. Well, we can all sit there and say he probably shouldn't be there. But unless that was your family member and it hits right in your chest, well, then things start changing in your head a little bit. You know, I had correlation to one of the victims in an avalanche 2 years ago. And that's when we started going to the awareness classes more. But even with the awareness classes, I learned in the level 1 class that I still had no idea what I was doing. And going to that class, I think, is huge. It's well worth the money. I was lucky enough to be gifted it. I didn't have my money, but if you can't afford it, you know, there's people out there that can help you. Christmas is right around the corner. So anybody that, you know, your parents you're asking for a Christmas gift, put that on your list. You will definitely.
And don't forget, there's opportunities right here with this show to get Avalanche classes. We've already this season given away for sure 4, if not 5 different level 1 Avalanche classes this year already. We, you know, through the product, you know, people buy the shirts and the hats. We gave away Avalanche class there. We are actually 2. Brian Lundstedt had given away 2 level 1 Avalanche classes, and then we've given away 3 scholarships already. So 5 different Avalanche classes we've you know, sponsored and given away too. And so by just being here on the show, sharing it out, you know, being involved, buying the product, making donations to the Live Large University Scholarship Fund, the sweepstakes, right? So that big sweepstakes that we've got going on right now, that the Fly sled is there. There's more level 1 classes being given away there as well. It goes on and on and on. And so that's the whole point of this show and everything we're doing is just what you've talked about. It's just kind of bringing the awareness to the topic and getting so many people involved, from the pros to the pro level to the folks who need the information at the beginner level and all the way up to even skilled riders like yourself who just now are getting that information in that eye-opening way. But think about, you know, some of the mistakes that you used to make prior to that level 1 class, and you've said it out loud now a couple times of like, I should have been dead like 5 or 6 times now. Like, give us an example of what you mean by that. So
well, you know, we go to these areas. I've been going to these areas from the time I was 10 to previous day now. And last year I went and took this class. I want to say it was pretty early in the season still. It was still wet, nasty. We're still getting our snowpack. So when we were doing the AV class, you know, we started getting a snowpack. It wasn't incredibly deep, but the most important part of that was, I think, is the multi-burial situations that class is able to put you in, when you got guys hiding in tree wells with their beacon on purpose just to give you a false signal. And you have someone timing you, and you have to ride up to the scene. You didn't see where they were going to hide the backpacks. You get radio called in, so you don't even know where they're at. They could be 10 miles down the trail that way or that way. You get radio called in and try to get directions over radio. And that was the coolest, most stressful, learning awesome time I've ever had is when we flew down the trail on our sleds and we pull up to a hillside and you see they purposely dig the hillside out over down a ravine, crosses the trail, and we're trying to coordinate with people that are acting as bystanders that have no idea with Avalanche classes going on. So you got to be able to work with them. You got to work with your group, have a leader. And so that was the coolest part of that. Now, where I've changed as a rider after this class, going up tree chutes on open hillside faces, seeing who can make the high mark on the hill. Because we all know that everybody loves to make the high mark. And I put a turbo on my sled so I can make the high mark. But I learned that I need to be cautious with my power under my sled because I can high mark anyone I want way up the hill. But guess where that puts me? It puts me in dangerous territory. And the only time you should be competing for that high mark is when it's safe. When we went to Whistler, this was a huge eye-opening, scary moment for all of us. As we're going up to the Pemberton ice caps, previously I would have never stepped off my sled. I would just keep cruising along, all excited to get up there to the open area. I would step off my sled every 2 to 3 miles as we start climbing in elevation, and I would dig myself a quick hand pit and do a hand shear test. So you take your hands, create a block, isolate the block, and see if you can pop the layer off to your chest. If, you're testing the snow, so if your fingers slide through it, you're okay for the, it's half decent snowpack. It's not too harmful. If you pop a slab off right then and there, huge indicator. Okay, today is going to be a day that we need to pay attention and be cautious. Ride some more, test the snow, keep testing it as you go.
Absolutely.
We got up to the ice fields that day, and there was a persistent weak layer on the top about a foot down that I popped off with my hands on the trail side.
You knew then just steep. To stay off of it, right?
Yep. Nothing steep, nothing crazy. I popped a persistent weak layer a couple different times as we were going up to the field.
Wow.
So we were staying low, boondocking. It was awesome. And we're like, hey, let's go up over this ridge and drop down into the next bull area. And so I went up and I was sitting on top of the ridge waiting for everybody. And I see them coming across the ice field. It's huge. You can see them. They look like ants way over there. And I quit seeing them. I'm like, where'd they go? And so I was too far out of range with my old radio, which I needed to upgrade, and I'm upgrading. Same with my my beacon this year is getting upgraded as well to the new one. So I'm updated on that stuff. But, I was too far out of range. So I came back when I finally got in radio distance. I'm like, hey, where are you guys? They're like, oh, there was an avalanche. So I flew across the ice field. Luckily, I made sure no one was hurt when I was on the radio. I flew back just to see what happened. And sure as hell, that 1 foot, that 1 foot layer that I tested on the trail, someone went up and looped out. And as they were coming down, luckily in Pemberton, there's not a lot of trees and you can outrun these things sometimes. Luckily he was able to outrun the thing, but it broke probably 100 yards across the hillside and a foot deep. Here comes a slab, and you look up and you see this big rigid edge and you see where the slide happened. And so I'm sitting there talking to my group about, hey, we talked about these things on the trail. What happened? Why are we going up this? You get that adrenaline, you get your big turbo sleds, and everybody wants to go flying up the hillside, and they forget what we were looking at on the trail side coming in. So I had to regroup everybody and go over what we saw and what happened. And while we're doing that as a group, there's another group next to us that I have no idea who they are. You're in Canada, they could be somewhere from out of state. They could be from locals, who knows?
Yeah.
They go up the same hillside, not 10 feet to the right of where that one just broke.
Amazing.
And turn out, and on the way down, here comes another one. And this one's double the size.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And luckily that guy, he probably shouldn't have outran that one. I seen the sled get bounced and tossed, and he probably was in the air for about 30 feet down the hill from the force of the avalanche pushing him.
Wow.
And he basically jumped 30 feet down the hill, got bounced around, came down. And, at this point, now you got 300 to 400 yards of hillside that has slid. And, that was those things, when you get put in that moment and see it break before your eyes, and you see that avalanche and you're family friend is in that, or whoever, someone in your group just broke an avalanche, it's like, okay, we need to get on this. We need to calm down. We're out here in Whistler. We're only here for 2 days. We're having fun, but we got to reel it in. And so when I went from hitting anything and everything, no matter the snow conditions and not paying attention to the snow conditions, to going up, breaking hand shear tests as we go up. If I'm seeing things that look concerning, I'll go dig a pit. And so I thought it was the coolest thing. I was up in our local area and I was able to dig a pit, find the persistent facet layer, weak layer that was, 3 feet down. This was towards the end of the season. There was a bad, very, very thick, nasty, persistent weak layer. I was able to stick my probe in it, mark it out, be able to take a picture of it and submit it to ARI and, the NWAC and everybody to show, the more people that can do these things, the more aware, the more accurate these forecasts can get. I've found super cool pride in that, being able to go out, dig a pit, because I learned that at my class, and evaluate the snowpack and then change where I was going to ride that day based on what I saw in the snowpack.
Yeah. Well, that's the cool thing, right? Is like, I know I've experienced this too, and it sounds like you have, where, you go from kind of being ignorant to avalanches, but having enough information to being like, oh man, like, what is it okay to ride here? Is it not okay? And you just don't know enough yet because all you've taken is the awareness classes. And so it almost becomes a little intimidating, a little freaky, and you kind of get a little bit of afraid of the terrain, right? Where once you've gone through the training and you get that level of understanding of what you're really dealing with, and you can now start, reading the forecast, understanding it as a great baseline, and then getting out there and making your own observations and seeing if what you're seeing in person is consistent with the avalanche forecast or different, and you can make decisions and judgments based on where you should or shouldn't ride that day. You said, you got a sled that is capable of doing a lot of these crazy things, but should I today? Like, probably not. There's other days maybe it's okay, and maybe a spring ride and those kind of things. I think of there was a very famous rider, Luke Rohde, who passed away up on Mount Baker that same year as your other friend did. And, I always think about that specific climb, the horse corral climb that is there. And, I look at that hill and that climb as a, mid-season during normal standard, considerable and, moderate, considerable or high level avalanche danger day. It's a hill I won't even ride. Like, I wouldn't even consider it. Right. And in the spring though, when it's low avalanche danger and I've been out riding all day and I can kind of tell that, everything's stuck really hard and solid, it's a super fun climb. And so even myself, I'll make decisions to ride different days in different areas, but there's some hills that just through main part of the season, when there's so many layers in there that haven't really settled in yet, like, it's just not worth the risk. And so then you just ride somewhere else for that part of the year. Guess what? Spring, it'll still be there waiting for you. And you think of those videos like Boondockers, Thunderstruck, all these big shoot climbs, especially the Thunderstruck video series. Most of those videos that those guys are doing are spring rides, right? Like, they're in that, late April, May, type riding where everything is set up really hard because they've done the training. They understand it. They know what they're dealing with. And so it's a good call out for all of us to go through there. So what are some specific things, Logan, that you've done differently now since your class on the start of your rides? Like, when you're going out riding with your buddies, are you guys, I'll throw out a couple things there, but go through it yourself here. Are you checking the avalanche conditions now? Are you having a pre-ride meeting? Are you doing beacon checks in the snow park? Talk us through some of the things that you do consistently now that weren't part of your routine before.
So things like, before we would sit down and look at the avalanche forecast, and all we would look at is what color and what it said. We wouldn't read the details of anything, before this, even with the awareness class. I never fully understood the forecast. All I knew was pop it up on my phone. Okay, it says considerable. Okay, we need to be cautious today. We'd go ride. Next morning, we'd take off, go ride. After the class, night before, we sit down and I look at the forecast. Not only do I look at what color and what it says, if you scroll down a little bit, there's a big paragraph. And it tells you lots of information that is very useful.
It says the bottom line, right? It's usually what it's described as. So.
Yep. And that bottom line is very useful. And a lot of people don't look at it, don't read it. And so reading that and understanding what those terms within those bottom lines mean is huge. So we sit down the night before, whatever my group's going to be. If someone's showing up in the morning, they end up getting a text of what we see and what's going to go on when they get there in the morning.
Nice.
And so we look at the avalanche forecast, and I usually take a couple notes. I have my little Avi book that I got at the class that I could take notes for the day in, and I stick it right here in my Highmark chest pocket, and it stays in there in a Ziploc bag with a pencil, so I can make notes and submit things at the end of my rides to help the forecasters out and help the community know. All my neighbors are usually probably go ride the same areas. If they weren't there that day, they might go ride it tomorrow. So being able to post about it and talk about it at the campfires at night in the neighborhood, and be able to submit it for extra forecast help to make the forecast as accurate as they can be. That's something we do. So I look at that. When we go out, we, get to the snow park, everybody gets all geared up, ready to rock and roll. Beacon check goes on. Everybody turns their beacon on. I turn mine on to transmit or to receive, and I check all theirs that they're transmitting properly, because sometimes you may have a beacon error. And so we check vice versa. Everybody checks their transmit and their send. And we check all the beacons front and back, and the whole group. We go over what we saw last night again to refresh our memory. We go over radios, make sure we all got our radios. We all got our beacons on and checked and ready. Everybody's got probes and knows how to use them. If someone does not know how to use their equipment right there in the snow park, guess who's getting undressed and showing them?
Yep, that's awesome.
I pull my stuff off, and we got to make sure that they can find a beacon. So I'll turn them around, and I'll go hide my beacon and make sure that they can at least go find it. I'd like to at least know that you can find it at a little bit under the surface layer of the snow and get a close, proximity. Yeah. So if something does happen, that person that has no idea now knows how to quickly deploy their probes and at least find the beacon before we go up. And so things like that were nothing that ever happened before. We'd unload, we'd turn them on. Everybody's on. Yep. Okay. Up the hill we went. Yep, and, awesome. You get up there and everybody disperses. You lose each other. You get stuck. You lose eye contact with people. And a lot of mistakes happen that could have caused serious harm to a lot of people. And I see it all. And I see it all the time. And it frustrates me now, actually. Yeah. I see stuff going on while I'm up there riding now that I would have never even thought about before. And it actually kind of frustrates me. And the inside of me wants to go yell at everyone, because I went and got trained, and I see how many mistakes are being made that can cost people's lives on this hillside. And it's not something to be scared about. It's not something to be scared about, but it's something that being aware and understanding makes, these mistakes be able to be eliminated. So,
well, let's talk about that for a minute, though, because you just talked about something that I also witness when I'm out there riding. Like, you come across other groups, and I'll tell you a specific ride last year for me. I was up in Gallagher. Anybody who rides the Salmon Lesac area knows Gallagher. And, you go back.
That's where I ride quite often.
Yeah, you go back to Hawkins Bowl, right? Yep. And there's, you got the main bowl there, and then there's that little area off to the right that you go up that gets super big, right? It's like the biggest area out there right now that you can climb in that area. And, if it's a good, decent day, I'll poke around up there, but if it's even a considerable day, I won't mess around. But there's times in spring rides I'm like, I'll ride. But then what we always do is, area of safety, right? Like island of safety. So we park as a group way far away off in the distance, and we're almost not visible from people who just ride into that little bowl. We're kind of up in the trees up behind there where we know there's no avalanche, risk there. And then we'll take turns one at a time and maybe climb this hill and high mark it a little bit. And what happened was we're back there in our group of safety, and we got riders going up one at a time, and everything seems to go just fine, no problem at all. And then I'll send another group of like 4 riders show up, and they pull it right to the bottom of the hill, and they sit there, right? And they, one of our riders, they come in and do that right as one of our riders is coming down, and our rider's like, well, they got to get out of there. So they come over and they come into our group, and then we sit and watch these guys, riding. And two of them go up at a time. In the meantime, there's the other guys are sitting at the bottom of the hill, and you're just like, oh my gosh, right? And so part of me is like, I want to go tell them too, which I don't want to go over there at the point where we've got other riders up on the hill, because now I'm in risk and it's not worth my life to go over and try and yell at these guys or talk to them, right? And so what I did is I just watched them for 10 minutes or so, right? Let them get it out of their system, let them do their thing, and I didn't want to go over there where there was any risk. And so once they all kind of gathered at the bottom of the hill again, like, and there was nobody on the hill, I'm like, I buzz over there. And so this is maybe something that'll help you, Logan, and anybody who's watching. There's ways you can approach a group like that tactfully, friendly, without making it a confrontation, right? Like, what I usually do is I'll ride up to a group like that. I'll be like, hey guys, how's it going? Having a great day? Like, oh, this is an awesome hill, huh? Like, yeah, I hit the top of it too. With our group though, just so you know, like, we're actually all, up over there just in case this hill did slide. We're out of the run out zone. I don't know if that's something you guys had thought about or not, but where you guys are sitting is kind of actually a bad spot. And like, you're a fellow sledder. Naturally, I love you to death, and so I'm just looking out for you. Hope that's okay that I share that with you. Just something like that is really easy. And like all of a sudden they're just they all look at each other and they're like, and the funny part is usually when I ride up to a group like that, there's at least one person in that group that I know, and I know they know better, like that's almost always somebody I know. And, sure enough, the exact same thing happened there. It's like, there's one guy in the group that I knew, and I mention it, and they're all looking at each other going like, guys, we knew better than this. What are we doing? Thank you, Jon, for saying something. Okay, let's go. And so then they all got up into the, they either left the area or they went back a little further too. But again, it's just a lot of times you can approach things like that and do it in a non-confrontational way, but also then not putting yourself in danger at the same time. You got to really watch it. But sometimes if you see that stuff happening, like, just kind of hang back and watch, because if the crap does hit the fan, you want to be there to help rescue them, but you don't want to put yourself in that risky area. So wow, it sounds like some amazing lessons learned. I mean, you're out there making a difference. You've become an advocate for the avalanche safety and education. Do you have other friends that you ride with now that are now inspired to try and get signed up for classes this coming year, or what does that look like? So.
Yeah, we're trying to get some of them. It's kind of funny. My riding group is very small. It's my brother, my dad. I got a couple buddies that go with me, and they're all trained up and they've gone and taken the classes. But, it's kind of, when you start getting in the higher level, it becomes a equalization of who I'm going to ride with skill wise, but as well as who's got the knowledge. We can go ride with anybody and everyone, and I choose very wisely who I'm going to ride with nowadays.
Yeah.
And I personally don't like riding in ginormous groups.
I hear you.
I'm not a ginormous group rider unless it's an organized group ride. And so I try to pick and choose where we're going to go and who we're with.
Yeah.
But my go-to guys that we go ride and we challenge each other while being safe, those guys have all been trained and are safe riders, and
awesome.
we have full confidence in each other that if something does happen to where our predictions and what we saw on this hillside was different from that hillside and we made a mistake and something happened, we have full confidence in each other that we will hopefully all make it out based on training and experience and
that's great.
And being able to do these different things. So it's just choosing who you ride with, choosing where you ride is very important. Those are the two biggest takeaways, and knowing and putting your hands on the equipment and actually using the equipment. It's one thing to own it. We a lot of us own it, but a lot of us haven't used it. And that's the biggest thing that was the biggest takeaway from taking that Avalanche 1 class, from the awareness class of buying the equipment and knowing about it to actually using it and learning, how dumb I was. That I had this great equipment that can save lives if you know how to properly use it. But that's awesome. I didn't know how to use it. I just owned it before. And so that would be my biggest takeaway is go bury backpacks, go learn your equipment, watch. There's lots of videos out there. If you can't afford to be in the Avalanche 1 class, watch classes and then go practice. It's just like riding a sled. The more practice you get, the better you get at it, the more confident you get. Go use your equipment.
Yeah. And it's, budgeting for the class is critical, right? I mean, I think anybody who is riding a remotely modern sled that's 5 years or less old, they're already riding with, $300 helmets, and, usually they have a $200 to $500 can on their sled, and, they got tunnel bags and all these things that we all quote unquote need, that we all think are part of the process, but it's no different, right? You just got to budget for it. You got to plan for it and prioritize it, right? And even in the scheme of like Avalanche education and equipment and stuff, beacon, shovel, probe, like those are the bare minimum, right? But if you're at that point where you're trying to decide whether whether you should buy an Avalanche bag or take a level 1 class, 100% of the time I'll tell someone, go take the level 1 Avalanche class first.
Correct.
Wait for the Avalanche bag a year or two, because guess what? If you take that level 1 class and you get the education that you need, the likelihood of you needing that bag anymore is a lot lower than it ever was before, right?
That is very correct.
Unfortunately, a lot of guys and gals, everybody who get the Avalanche bag first and are just unaware of what they're really dealing with, it unfortunately gives them this false sense of security and a little bit of a cocky attitude about like, oh, I got the Avalanche bag now, I can go do whatever I want, right?
That was me.
Yep.
That was me.
Yep. And so, that's the big lesson learned right there, is that, don't ever, and this is advice for your entire life. Like, Logan, you too, as you get into your career and your future and building a life for yourself, it's like what you've learned in this process is this: don't ever assume you already know something, right? Like, listen, just open your ears, open your eyes, and pay attention to what's going on around you. Take advantage of any and all opportunities to learn something. Worst thing that'll ever happen is you've heard something twice, right? That's the worst thing that'll happen.
Yep.
But in the meantime, you can 100% continue to just grow it, right? And get more knowledge. And, the funny part is all of us will say this, I don't care who you are, what age you are, the more we learn, the less we realized we knew, right?
Yep.
Like, oh my gosh, like I thought I knew something before. Guess what? I didn't, right? And so all of that's there too. So, Logan, your story is from someone of your age and your skill level and your experience, to me is as important as any story that we've ever told on this show, because it really targets that target audience of folks who sometimes are resistant to going and get that training. And so, share the show out with anybody, Logan. I know you got a lot of pages that you follow. Just help get the information out there, and I think your credibility will help get this message out in a positive way. So.
Yeah, you see lots of pro riders, and there's a lot of times that I've seen stuff posted by pro riders that have a huge following, and they're pushing slides with their sleds. There's slides happening around them, avalanches left and right, and they don't think anything of it. They might even laugh at it, and they think it's funny that they outran an avalanche again. Oh, I outran another one, or oh, today we had an avalanche happen.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So seeing that, the more people that are aware, the more people that are heavy skill set riders and start growing followers and trying to do what I love to do and I'm trying to do, the more that are aware, the better. And so that's why I wanted to hop on here, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to be able to share my story.
My pleasure.
And if you haven't used the equipment, please use it. Learn it, and take a class if you can.
Yep. No, I hear you. So I got one question here that popped in. Kyle Franklin's asking, have you ever blown your airbag yet, either by accident or in a situation? Like, have you been in an avalanche situation where you've had to pull your airbag yet? Or
the only time I've pulled my airbag is when we're messing around going down the trail. I try not to even pull my handle out of my backpack, because I know that I should be in a safe area, that I shouldn't have to pull my handle out just in case. In Whistler, I had my handle out because I seen slabs.
Yeah.
My riding choice for that day kept me in areas where I wouldn't be putting an avalanche on myself. But just in case something happened around me, my handle was out. But very rarely do I even have my handle out of my bag. I wear the bag. I wear a vest more for the chest protection.
Yeah.
After I hurt my sternum overshooting a jump, I wear that for that reason more than I do the backpack. And I like to have storage on me. But the only time I've pulled my bag is at the end of the season to pull it and repack it and empty the canister out for the season and then have it filled for the next season.
Yep. Always test it.
Yep. So that's about the only time I've never pulled mine in a real situation to where we've needed it. It's usually just messing around with buddies at the end of the day, going down the trail of, hey, he's got his handle out. See if I can blow it off, and then we'll have to repack it and stop at the last resort across the street and get some air before we go home.
That's funny.
So yeah, I've never got myself into a situation where I need to pull it, but
then you know you're doing it right? Like that's
Yep.
actually a good thing, right? If you've never had to pull it in an avalanche yet, it means you're making better decisions. So awesome. Well, Logan, you know, last opportunity here. Any final words? Any thank yous you want to give out? Anything else? I know you already said thanks for the opportunity for the show, but anybody else you want to give a quick shout out to before we wrap this up?
Huge shout out again to 509. Great company, great product, great support. I'm super happy to be able to ride for them and my sponsors. Go check out my pages. They're all listed, tagged all over the place. That's one thing I do very well, is tag everyone and everyone. So if you're curious of what I use for my sled setup, if you want to see my new factory turbo build this year, feel free to follow me, ask questions, contact me about avalanche safety and talk about it.
Awesome.
Come ride with me. Let's schedule some photos and videos for your page, and have a great year out there. And feel free to reach out to me, and for any reasons at all that relate to anything. So.
Yep. No, that's perfect too. And so, Logan, the last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring up my flag image one more time and remind everybody what it says here. It says, live life to the fullest, make the most of every day, and make a difference to others. And bottom line, go ahead.
And the back of my shirt says holder wide.
Oop, the phone just fell over, but yeah, it's okay.
Let's see if we can rotate it here. We got the back of my shirt says holder wide. So
there you go.
That's my motto.
Awesome. So remind everybody, God bless you all and live large. Have a great night.